Liam Cross had destroyed empires with less effort than it took to speak the words that would haunt him forever. 2 syllables. Plain, ordinary. Carelessly thrown into the night air like poison arrows, finding their mark in Eleanor Marchant's heart. He didn't know then that what began with arrogance would end with him on his knees, and the journey between would consume them both. The yacht Serendipity cut through Newport's crystalline waters like a knife through silk, its deck alive with the chatter of Rhode Island's elite. Crystal glasses clinked in harmony with gentle waves lapping against the hull, while the setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. It was the kind of evening that whispered of possibilities, the kind that could change lives forever. Eleanor Ellie Marchant stood at the starboard railing, her auburn hair catching the dying light as she gazed out at the horizon. She didn't belong here among the diamonds and designer gowns, and she knew it. Her simple black dress, elegant in its restraint, marked her as an outsider in this world of excess. But her friend Chloe had insisted, practically dragging her from her paint-splattered studio with promises that one night away from her art wouldn't kill her. "You're being ridiculous, Ellie," Chloe had argued. "When will you get another chance to rub elbows with people who could actually buy your paintings?" Now, watching the practiced smiles and hollow conversations swirling around her, Ellie wondered if her instincts had been right. She was an artist, not a socialite. Her hands were meant to hold paintbrushes, not champagne flutes. Across the deck, Liam Cross surveyed his domain with the calculating gaze of a predator. At 32, he had built an empire from lines of code and ruthless ambition, transforming his tech company into a behemoth that dominated global markets. His presence commanded attention without effort. Tall, commanding, with sharp features that seemed carved from marble and eyes the color of winter storms. People gravitated toward him not just for his wealth, but for the dangerous magnetism that surrounded him like an invisible force field. His best friend and business partner, Ryan Matthews, nudged him with an elbow. "See the brunette by the railing? The one who looks like she'd rather be anywhere else?" Liam's gaze followed Ryan's gesture, landing on Ellie's solitary figure. For a moment, something flickered in his chest, a recognition he couldn't name. There was something about her stillness, the way she stood apart from the crowd, that intrigued him. She wasn't performing like the others, wasn't trying to impress or seduce. She simply was. "Go ask her to dance," Ryan suggested, his tone carrying the easy confidence of someone who had never met a social situation he couldn't navigate. The suggestion should have been simple. In Liam's world, he took what he wanted when he wanted it. Deals worth billions were negotiated with less hesitation than this moment required. But as he studied Ellie's profile, watching the way the wind played with her hair, something protective and possessive stirred within him, emotions he had no framework to understand. "She's not exactly my type," he heard himself say, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. His voice carried that particular tone of dismissive arrogance that had served him so well in boardrooms. "A bit too ordinary. Plain, really." The words hung in the air like poison, and Liam felt their wrongness the moment they left his lips. Because she wasn't ordinary at all. Even from this distance, he could see the elegant line of her neck, the thoughtful set of her shoulders, the quiet strength that radiated from her very being. She was extraordinary, and his words were a lie born from some twisted form of self-protection. But lies, once spoken, take on a life of their own. Ellie had been moving closer to the group, drawn by Chloe's animated gestures as she tried to include her friend in the evening's festivities. The champagne had loosened her reserve slightly, and she had almost convinced herself that perhaps she could find some enjoyment in this gilded cage of privilege. Then she heard them. Plain. Ordinary. The words hit her like physical blows, each syllable a sharp edge cutting through her carefully constructed armor. She froze mid-step, her champagne glass trembling in her hand as the cruel assessment washed over her. For a moment, the yacht, the party, the glittering ocean, everything disappeared except the terrible clarity of those words and the arrogant tone in which they had been delivered. She turned, her eyes seeking and finding the source of her humiliation. Liam Cross stood 30 feet away, his perfect profile etched against the sunset, completely unaware that his casual cruelty had just shattered something precious inside her. He continued his conversation with Ryan, oblivious to the devastation he had wreaked. Plain. Ordinary. The words echoed in her mind, mixing with every insecurity she had ever harbored about herself, every moment she had felt inadequate or overlooked. Here, among these beautiful people with their perfect lives, his assessment felt like the final confirmation of everything she had always feared about herself. Ellie's artistic soul, sensitive to every nuance of human emotion, absorbed the insult like watercolor on wet paper. It spread and deepened and stained everything it touched. Her cheeks burned with shame and fury, her heart hammering against her ribs with such force she was certain everyone could hear it. She set her champagne glass on the nearest table with deliberate precision, her movements controlled despite the storm raging inside her. Without a word to Chloe, without a glance backward, she walked toward the yacht's exit with her head held high and her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. As she reached the gangplank, Liam turned, some instinct alerting him to her departure. Their eyes met across the crowded deck, hers blazing with hurt and contempt, his suddenly wide with the dawning realization of what he had done. The connection lasted only a second, but in that brief moment, he saw himself reflected in her gaze, cruel, shallow, unworthy. Then she was gone, disappearing into the Newport night like a ghost, leaving Liam standing frozen on the deck with the terrible knowledge that he had just destroyed something beautiful before he had even understood what it was. Ryan appeared at his shoulder, frowning. What happened? She looked like she'd seen the devil himself. Liam's throat felt thick, his usual eloquence deserting him entirely, because he had seen the devil, in his own reflection in her wounded eyes, and the sight would haunt him for the rest of his life. How could one moment of cruelty change everything? How could words spoken in arrogance become the foundation for the most desperate pursuit of his entire existence? Liam Cross was about to discover that some mistakes don't just echo, they consume, devour, and transform until redemption becomes the only path to salvation. The Uber ride back to her studio passed in a blur of city lights and self-recrimination. Ellie pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching Newport's elegant mansions give way to the more modest neighborhoods of downtown Providence. With every mile that passed, the reality of what had happened settled deeper into her bones. She had been invisible her entire life. In school, in college, in the art world where she struggled to make her voice heard above the cacophony of more connected, more confident artists. She had made peace with her invisibility, even found strength in it. But to be seen and found wanting, to have her worth dismissed so casually by someone who didn't even know her name, that was a special kind of cruelty. Her studio apartment, tucked above a used bookstore on Federal Hill, welcomed her with the familiar sense of turpentine and acrylic paint. The space was small but filled with light, her canvases arranged along every available wall surface like windows into different worlds. This was where she belonged, where she mattered, where her voice couldn't be dismissed or diminished. She changed out of her dress mechanically, hanging it in the back of her closet where she wouldn't have to look at it and remember. Then she pulled on her paint-stained jeans and an old sweater and stood before her easel, brush in hand, trying to channel her hurt into something beautiful. But the colors seemed muted, the composition lifeless. Liam Cross's words had poisoned even this sanctuary, this most sacred space where she created and dreamed and became more than ordinary. Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse overlooking the harbor, Liam stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows and felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine regret. Not the strategic regret of a missed business opportunity or a poorly timed investment, but the deep, gnawing regret that comes from recognizing you have wounded another human being for no reason other than your own inadequacy. He had built his empire on the principle that perception was reality, that controlling the narrative meant controlling the outcome. But tonight, he had lost control of both the narrative and himself, and in doing so, he had revealed something ugly at his core. His phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Got her number from Chloe. Going to text her? See if she's okay. The message sent an unexpected spike of jealousy through Liam's chest. Ryan would text her. Ryan would check on her. Ryan, who was everything Liam wasn't, warm, genuine, effortlessly likable, would be the one to offer comfort where Liam had inflicted pain. "Don't," he typed back, then deleted it. What right did he have to interfere? What claim did he have on her attention or her forgiveness? But as the hours passed and sleep eluded him, Liam found himself doing something he had never done before. Researching someone not for business advantage, but for understanding. Eleanor Marchant was 28, a graduate of Rhode Island School of Design, and a painter whose work had been featured in several local galleries. Her artist statement, which he found on her website, spoke of finding beauty in overlooked moments, of giving voice to the voiceless. I believe she had written that every person carries a universe of stories within them, and my job as an artist is to help make those stories visible. The words hit him like a physical blow. She saw universes in people, while he had dismissed her as ordinary. She sought to make the invisible visible, while he had made her feel unseen. The contrast between her vision and his cruelty was so stark, it made him feel physically sick. Her paintings, displayed in the online gallery, revealed a sensitivity and depth that took his breath away. Portraits of elderly couples holding hands on park benches, children lost in play, workers heading home at twilight, each piece captured something ineffably human and precious. This was the work of someone who saw the world with extraordinary clarity and compassion. This was the work of someone extraordinary. By dawn, Liam had made a decision that would have shocked anyone who knew him. He was going to apologize, not with flowers or gifts or grand gestures, but with the one thing he had never freely given to anyone, his honest, unguarded vulnerability. He would find a way to reach her, to show her that his words had been the lie and his regret was the truth. He would prove to her, and to himself, that he was capable of being better than the man she had seen on that yacht. What he didn't anticipate was how desperately he would need that chance, or how completely the pursuit of her forgiveness would consume him. The obsession had begun, and neither of them was prepared for where it would lead. But some obsessions are born not from unhealthy fixation, but from the soul's recognition of what it has been searching for all along. And Liam Cross, who had never believed in fate or destiny or second chances, was about to discover that sometimes the heart knows what it needs long before the mind understands why. Three days after the yacht party, Ellie's phone began buzzing with messages from Ryan Matthews. The first was simple. "Hey, it's Ryan from the other night. Hope you're doing well." She almost deleted it without responding, but something in the tone, casual, friendly, without any underlying agenda, made her hesitate. "I'm fine," she typed back. "Thank you for asking. Want to grab coffee sometime? No pressure. Just thought you seemed like someone who'd have interesting conversations." Despite herself, Ellie found the offer appealing. Ryan had seemed different from the others at the party, less performative, more genuine. And after days of isolation in her studio, nursing her wounded pride and trying to forget the humiliation of that night, she realized she missed human connection. They met at a small cafe in Federal Hill, and Ellie was relieved to find that her instincts had been correct. Ryan was easy to talk to, genuinely interested in her art, and refreshingly free of the pretension that had suffocated her at the yacht party. He asked thoughtful questions about her work and listened to her answers with the kind of attention she rarely received. What she didn't know was that every detail of their conversation would find its way back to Liam Cross, who hung on Ryan's every word, like a man dying of thirst being offered water drop by precious drop. "She's incredible," Ryan reported during one of their regular check-ins. "Not just beautiful, though she is, but smart, passionate, funny. She sees things differently than anyone I've ever met." Liam felt each word like a physical ache. He wanted to know about the way she saw things. He wanted to understand her passion, to be the recipient of her attention and insight. Instead, he was reduced to living vicariously through his best friend's interactions with the woman who had begun to occupy his every waking thought. The reasonable thing would have been to move on, to file the yacht party incident under lessons learned, and return to his carefully ordered life. But Liam Cross had not built an empire by being reasonable when something mattered to him, and somehow, incomprehensibly, Eleanor Marchant had begun to matter more than anything ever had. He hired a private investigator, not to stalk her, he told himself, but simply to understand her world better. He learned about her schedule, her habits, the galleries she visited, the coffee shops she frequented. The information sat like a weight in his pocket, unused but treasured. Each detail adding to the mosaic of a woman he was beginning to understand he had never stopped thinking about. The first accidental encounter happened at the Providence Art Museum, where Ellie spent most Sunday afternoons studying the masters and finding inspiration in their techniques. Liam positioned himself in front of a Monet water lily painting, pretending to study the brushwork while actually watching her reflection in the glass. She moved through the galleries with a reverence that bordered on worship, pausing before each piece long enough to truly see it, to absorb its message and meaning. When she stopped in front of a Van Gogh self-portrait, Liam saw her lips move slightly, as if she were having a conversation with the long-dead artist. The urge to approach her was overwhelming, but he held himself back. He wasn't ready yet. He didn't have the words to undo the damage he had caused, and he knew he would only get one chance to make this right. The second encounter was at her local coffee shop, where he arrived 30 minutes before her usual Wednesday morning visit and positioned himself at a corner table with his laptop and a legal pad covered in meaningless notes. When she entered, he felt his heart rate spike. His palms grow damp with nervous anticipation. She ordered her usual, a large coffee with extra cream, a blueberry muffin, and settled at her preferred table by the window. For 45 minutes, Liam watched her sketch in a small notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration, her free hand absently toying with a strand of her hair. The domestic intimacy of observing her in her natural environment felt both precious and invasive. When she packed up to leave, their eyes met briefly across the cafe. There was no recognition in her gaze, no acknowledgement that she remembered him at all. He was nobody to her, invisible, irrelevant. Everything he had once made her feel about herself, the irony was not lost on him. By the time the third coincidental meeting occurred, this time at the farmer's market where she shopped for the fruits and vegetables she painted in her still life series, Liam had to acknowledge the truth. He wasn't just trying to apologize anymore. He was studying her, learning her, becoming intimately acquainted with the rhythms of her life. He was obsessed. The realization should have alarmed him. Liam Cross was a man who prized control above all else, who approached every aspect of his life with strategic precision. This desperate need to be near someone who didn't even know he existed was foreign to everything he understood about himself. But understanding didn't diminish the compulsion. If anything, it intensified it. He began to structure his days around the possibility of glimpsing her. He rearranged meetings, canceled social obligations, and declined business trips, all in service of maintaining proximity to a woman who had unknowingly become the center of his universe. Ryan, meanwhile, continued his friendship with Ellie, oblivious to the role he was playing in Liam's elaborate dance of penance and pursuit. Their coffee dates became regular occurrences, their conversations deeper and more personal with each meeting. "She's been hurt," Ryan mentioned one evening as he and Liam shared drinks at their usual bar. "Not just recently, there's something deeper there. She's got walls up that would make Fort Knox jealous." Liam's chest tightened with guilt and something else, a fierce protectiveness that had no logical basis. Who had hurt her? What had made her so guarded? The irony that he had likely contributed to those very walls wasn't lost on him. "Maybe she has good reasons for those walls," Liam said quietly. Ryan shot him a curious look. "You say that like you know something about it." Liam lifted his scotch to his lips, buying time, fighting the urge to confess everything. But the words he had spoken on the yacht felt like acid in his throat, too toxic to voice aloud even in the context of confession and regret. "Just seems like someone that careful has learned to be that way for a reason," he said instead. What he didn't say was that he was becoming increasingly desperate to be the reason she could learn to trust again. The depth of his need to earn her forgiveness, to prove his worth to her, was beginning to frighten him with its intensity. But fear had never stopped Liam Cross from pursuing something he wanted. And he had never wanted anything the way he wanted Eleanor Marchant's absolution. and eventually, impossibly, her heart. The pursuit was no longer just about redemption. It was about salvation, his own. Would his relentless observation of her life eventually create the opportunity he desperately sought? Or would his growing obsession ultimately destroy any chance of earning the forgiveness he craved? One thing was certain. Liam Cross had never faced a challenge that mattered more, and failure was not an option he was prepared to consider. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to Ellie's studio on elegant stationery that bore the Cross Foundation letterhead. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the wax seal, a pretentious touch that immediately put her on guard. Dear Ms. Marchant, the Cross Foundation is pleased to commission you for a significant artistic project. We are opening a new pediatric wing at Providence General Hospital and seek an artist of exceptional talent to create an installation that will bring hope and healing to the children and families who will pass through those halls. The commission fee is $150,000, with an additional $50,000 for materials and installation. We believe your particular artistic vision aligns perfectly with our mission to bring beauty and comfort to those who need it most. Please contact our project coordinator, Mr. Liam Cross, at your earliest convenience to discuss the details. Sincerely. The Cross Foundation board. Ellie read the letter 3 times, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and terror. $200,000 would change her life, pay off her student loans, allow her to move to a larger studio, give her the financial freedom to pursue her art without the constant worry about rent and groceries. But Liam Cross. The name on the page made her stomach clench with remembered humiliation. She hadn't forgotten the man from the yacht party, hadn't forgotten the casual cruelty of his dismissal. Now he was offering her the opportunity of a lifetime, and she couldn't decide if it was a gift or a trap. She called Chloe, who squealed with excitement at the news. Ellie, this is incredible. Do you know how prestigious the Cross Foundation is? This could launch your career into the stratosphere. But it's him, Ellie said, pacing her small studio. The man from the yacht party. The one who called me plain and ordinary. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure? I mean, Cross is a pretty common name, and you said it was dark, and there were a lot of people there. Ellie closed her eyes, but the memory was crystal clear. Those winter storm eyes, that aristocratic profile, the arrogant tilt of his head as he delivered his casual assassination of her worth. It's him, I'm sure. Okay, so maybe he doesn't remember you. Maybe this is just business. But Ellie's artist intuition told her otherwise. There were dozens of talented artists in Providence, many with more established reputations and gallery connections. Why her? Why now? Still, $200,000 was $200,000. And the project itself, bringing beauty to sick children, called to something deep in her artistic soul. How could she turn down the chance to create something that might bring a moment of joy to a frightened child, or comfort to a worried parent? She made the call. Cross Foundation, Liam Cross speaking. His voice was deeper than she remembered, with a rough edge that suggested sleepless nights. This is Eleanor Marchant. I received your commission letter. The silence on the other end stretched so long she wondered if the call had dropped. Then, Ms. Marchant, thank you for calling. I wasn't sure if you would. Something in his tone, vulnerable, almost hopeful, gave her pause. This wasn't the arrogant man from the yacht party. This voice carried weight, regret, a careful reverence that she didn't understand. I'm interested in discussing the project, she said carefully, though I have to admit I'm surprised by the offer. We haven't met, have we? Another pause. We have, actually, briefly, at a party several weeks ago. I doubt you remember. It was crowded, and we weren't introduced. The lie sat between them like a third party on the call. He remembered perfectly, and somehow impossibly, so did she, not just the words he had spoken, but the way he had looked when he spoke them. Confident, dismissive, cruel. But this man on the phone sounded nothing like that man. This man sounded careful, respectful, almost nervous. I see, she said, though she didn't see it all. Well, perhaps we could meet to discuss the project details? Of course. Would you prefer to meet at your studio? I could come to you. The offer surprised her. In her limited experience with wealthy patrons, they expected artists to come to them, to supplicant themselves in marble foyers and mahogany-paneled offices. The suggestion that he would enter her world, adapt to her environment, felt like an unexpected courtesy. That would be fine. Tomorrow at 2? Perfect, Ms. Marchant. Thank you for considering this. It means more than you know. The call ended, leaving Ellie staring at her phone in confusion. Whatever game Liam Cross was playing, she couldn't decipher the rules. But the project was real, the money was real, and her rent was due in 2 weeks. She would take the commission. She would work with him professionally, politely, and distantly. She would create something beautiful for the children who needed it, collect her payment, and never think about yacht parties or cruel words or winter storm eyes again. It was a good plan. A sensible plan. It was also completely impossible, though she wouldn't realize that until Liam Cross walked into her studio, and she saw the truth written in every line of his face. This wasn't business at all. This was penance. And somehow, inexplicably, she was the only one who could grant him absolution. But would she want to, once she understood the true depths of his regret and the relentless obsession that had driven him to engineer this elaborate opportunity for redemption? The commission would test them both in ways neither was prepared for, and only time would tell whether their collaboration would heal old wounds or create new ones. Liam arrived at Ellie's studio precisely at 2, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression of such careful neutrality that it immediately put her on alert. This was a man preparing for battle, though she couldn't fathom what war they were fighting. Her studio looked different through his eyes. Smaller, more intimate, alive with creative energy that seemed to pulse from every surface. Canvases lined the walls in various stages of completion, some bold and vibrant, others subtle and contemplative. The space smelled of paint and turpentine and something indefinably personal that made his chest tight with longing. Coffee? He offered her one of the cups, noting the way she accepted it without letting their fingers brush. Everything about her body language screamed wariness, from the rigid set of her shoulders to the careful distance she maintained between them. Thank you. She gestured to a small seating area she had, arranged near the windows, 2 mismatched chairs and a paint-splattered table that had seen better days. Please sit. He did, watching as she settled across from him with the table between them like a barrier. In the afternoon light streaming through her north-facing windows, she was even more beautiful than his memory had painted her. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun secured with what looked like a paintbrush, and there was a small smudge of blue acrylic on her left cheekbone that he wanted desperately to reach out and brush away. So, she said, pulling out a notebook and pen, tell me about the project. For the next 30 minutes, they discussed logistics with professional detachment. The pediatric wing would feature a central atrium with soaring ceilings and abundant natural light. The installation would need to be visible from multiple levels, engaging but not overwhelming, appropriate for children while sophisticated enough to appeal to adult sensibilities. Ellie's questions were insightful, her suggestions innovative. As she spoke about color theory and the psychological impact of art on healing environments, Liam found himself captivated not just by her expertise, but by the passion that animated her features when she discussed her craft. I'm thinking something that changes with the light, she said, sketching rough concepts in her notebook. Something that would look different at dawn than at dusk, so children who are there for extended stays would have new discoveries to make each day. That's brilliant. The words came out more fervent than he intended, and she looked up from her sketch with surprise. It's just an initial concept. There are technical challenges to work out, budgetary considerations. Money isn't an object. He leaned forward, caught up in her vision. Whatever you need, whatever it costs to make this perfect, it's yours. Something shifted in her expression, a wariness that went beyond professional caution. Mr. Cross, can I ask you something? His heart rate spiked, but he nodded. Why me? You could have your pick of established artists, people with museum exhibitions and international reputations. Why offer this commission to someone you don't know? The moment had arrived. the reckoning he had been preparing for and dreading in equal measure. He could continue the charade, pretend their previous meeting had been forgettable and inconsequential. He could maintain the fiction that this was purely about her artistic merit. But looking into her eyes, seeing the intelligence and integrity that radiated from her very being, he knew that anything less than complete honesty would be another betrayal. "Because I do know you," he said quietly. "We met at the yacht party. More than met. I hurt you. Badly. And I've been trying to find a way to apologize ever since." The color drained from her face, her pencil falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. "You remember?" "I remember everything. Every word. Every moment. The look on your face when you heard what I said." His voice was barely above a whisper, thick with self-loathing. "I remember how you left, and I remember knowing that I had just done something unforgivable." Ellie stood abruptly, pacing to her easel and back, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "So this is what, guilt money? A wealthy man's way of buying absolution?" "No." He rose too, desperate to make her understand. "I mean, yes, I felt guilty. I still do. But this project is real, Ellie. The foundation has been planning it for months, and when the board started discussing potential artists, I thought of you. I thought of your work, your vision, your ability to see beauty where others see only emptiness. You don't know anything about my vision." She snapped, whirling to face him. "You looked at me and saw plain and ordinary and not worth your time. That's what you saw." The words hit him like physical blows, each one a reminder of his cruelty. "You're right. That night, I saw only my own insecurities reflected back at me. I saw someone real and genuine in a room full of people playing roles, and it terrified me. So I diminished you to make myself feel safe." She stared at him, searching his face for deception, for the casual arrogance she remembered from the yacht. Instead, she found something that looked remarkably like anguish. "I've spent every day since then trying to understand why I said those things," he continued. "I've looked at your work, learned about your career, watched you move through the world with a grace and authenticity that I've never possessed. And I've realized that everything I said about you was wrong, and everything it revealed about me was unforgivably true." Silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of confession and the possibility of either redemption or final rejection. "You've been watching me," she said finally, her voice barely audible. He nodded, shame flooding his features. "I know how that sounds. I know how wrong it was, but I couldn't figure out how to approach you, how to begin to make amends. Every time I saw you, I was reminded of how badly I had failed as a human being. So you've been following me, studying me, learning my habits like I'm some kind of project to be solved?" "Yes." The admission cost him, but he wouldn't lie to her again. "And I know that makes me sound like a stalker or worse. But Ellie, I swear to you, I was never trying to frighten you or make you uncomfortable. I was trying to understand you well enough to find the words to apologize." She resumed her pacing, her mind racing. The man standing in her studio bore no resemblance to the arrogant billionaire from the yacht party. This man looked haunted, desperate, utterly stripped of pretense. But that didn't erase what he had done, didn't undo the humiliation he had caused her. "And the commission?" she asked. "Is this your grand gesture? Your way of proving you've learned your lesson?" "The commission is real," he said firmly. "Those children need what you can give them. I may have suggested you to the board, but they approved the choice based on your portfolio, your reputation, your ability to create something extraordinary. This isn't charity, Ellie. This is recognition of your talent." She wanted to refuse. Every self-protective instinct she possessed screamed at her to throw him out of her studio, to reject his money and his project and his tortured apologies. He had wounded her in a way that still ached, had made her doubt herself when she was already struggling with insecurity and self-worth. But $200,000 would change her life. And more than that, those children really would benefit from her art. Could she let her personal feelings prevent her from creating something that might bring joy to a sick child? "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course." He pulled a business card from his wallet, writing something on the back before placing it on her table. "That's my personal number. Call me when you've decided, whatever you decide. And Ellie?" She looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time since his confession. "I meant what I said about your work. You see universes in people, find beauty in moments others overlook. You make the invisible visible. That's not ordinary, that's miraculous. I should have seen that immediately. I should have been honored just to share the same space as someone with your gift." He left then, closing the door quietly behind him, leaving Ellie alone with her racing thoughts and the business card that seemed to burn against the paint-stained wood of her table. Outside, Liam sat in his car for long minutes, his hands shaking against the steering wheel. He had laid himself bare, confessed his sins, offered what redemption he could. The next move was hers, and for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Liam Cross was completely, terrifyingly powerless. But sometimes powerlessness is exactly what the heart needs to discover its true strength. Would Ellie find the courage to take this leap of faith? And would Liam prove worthy of the trust he was so desperately asking her to place in him? Ellie didn't sleep that night. She paced her small apartment, made tea she didn't drink, and stared at canvases she couldn't focus on. Liam's words echoed in her mind, mixing with her own memories of that night on the yacht, until she could barely separate what had happened from what was happening now. "I saw someone real and genuine in a room full of people playing roles, and it terrified me." The explanation was almost worse than the original insult. To know that he had seen her clearly, really seen her, and had felt compelled to diminish her because of his own fears, made his cruelty feel more personal, more calculated. But there had been something in his eyes during his confession, something raw and desperate that spoke to a part of her she thought she had successfully buried. He was hurting too, differently than she had hurt, but genuinely. His pursuit of her, his careful study of her life and work, his elaborate scheme to create an opportunity for apology, it all spoke to a man consumed by regret. Did that excuse what he had done? Did it obligate her to forgive him? She was still wrestling with those questions when Chloe arrived the next morning with coffee and croissants and an expression of barely contained curiosity. "So?" Chloe demanded, settling on Ellie's second-hand sofa with the expectation of a detailed debriefing. "How did it go with Mr. Mysterious Billionaire?" Ellie told her everything. The commission, the confession, the weeks of secret observation that felt both invasive and strangely devoted. When she finished, Chloe sat in silence for several minutes, processing the complexity of the situation. "Okay, so he's definitely the guy from the yacht party," Chloe said finally. "And he definitely said those awful things about you. But Ellie, honey, he also spent weeks trying to figure out how to apologize to you. That's not normal behavior for a man who doesn't care about the damage he's done." "It's obsessive behavior," Ellie countered. "Following me, learning my schedule, engineering situations to be near me. That's not healthy, Chloe. That's stalking." "Is it, though?" Chloe leaned forward, her expression serious. "I mean, yes, it's intense. But he never approached you, never made you feel unsafe, never tried to force an interaction. He was trying to understand you well enough to earn the right to apologize. That's actually kind of romantic in a really twisted way." Ellie stared at her friend in disbelief. "Romantic? He insulted me, then stalked me. He wounded you, then devoted himself to understanding why what he did was wrong," Chloe corrected. "There's a difference. Look, I'm not saying you should forgive him or trust him or anything like that, but Ellie, when was the last time anyone put that much effort into trying to make things right with you?" The question hit harder than Ellie expected. The truth was, no one ever had. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus had never apologized for anything, had never acknowledged when he hurt her feelings or dismissed her dreams. Her parents loved her, but had never understood her artistic aspirations, treating her career like a phase she would eventually outgrow. Even her few gallery relationships had been transactional, focused more on sales than on understanding her vision. But Liam Cross, a man who barely knew her, who owed her nothing, had apparently restructured his entire life around the possibility of earning her forgiveness. "The commission is real," she said quietly. "The project would genuinely help sick children. And it would help you too," Chloe pointed out. "This is your big break, Ellie, the kind of opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime." Can you really let what happened on that yacht cost you your future? That evening, Ellie walked through the pediatric ward at Providence General Hospital. She had called ahead, explaining that she was considering an art commission for the new wing, and the head nurse had been delighted to give her a tour. The current children's area was functional but sterile, all beige walls and fluorescent lighting that cast everything in harsh, unflattering shadows. The children she met, some bald from chemotherapy, others attached to various machines, all of them carrying burdens too heavy for their young shoulders, broke her heart and ignited her artistic passion simultaneously. Art makes such a difference, the head nurse, Janet, explained as they walked through the playroom. We have some donated paintings in the hallways, but nothing specifically designed for this space, this purpose. The children respond so strongly to beauty, to color, to things that help them imagine beyond these walls. Ellie watched a 6-year-old girl with huge eyes and a pink headscarf carefully coloring a picture of a butterfly, her tongue poking out in concentration. When the girl looked up and smiled at her, a smile of pure, uncomplicated joy, despite everything she was enduring, Ellie felt something inside her chest crack open. These children needed what she could give them. They needed beauty and hope, and the kind of visual magic that could transport them, even temporarily, beyond their current reality. How could she let her wounded pride stand in the way of that? But more than that, and this was the realization that surprised her, she wanted to work with Liam Cross, not because she forgave him, not because she trusted him, but because his obvious torment over what he had done suggested he might understand the weight of what they were trying to create together. She called him that night, her hands trembling as she dialed the number he had written on his business card. Ellie, he answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with hope and anxiety. I'll take the commission, she said without preamble. The silence that followed was so complete, she wondered if the call had dropped. Then, thank you. You won't regret this, I promise. I have conditions. Anything. This is strictly professional. We work together because those children need what we can create together. But that doesn't make us friends. It doesn't mean I forgive you, or trust you, or want anything from you beyond a successful project. Understood. And I want complete creative control. No interference, no suggestions, no corporate committee input. You hire me to create something beautiful, then you let me create it. Done. The ease of his agreement surprised her. She had expected negotiation, pushback, some assertion of his authority as the client. Instead, he seemed genuinely relieved just to have her accept the project at all. We'll need to meet regularly, she continued. Site visits, progress reports, technical consultations. Can you handle being around someone who doesn't like you very much? Another pause. This one edged with something that sounded like pain. I can handle whatever you need me to handle, as long as it means those children get the art they deserve. After the call ended, Ellie sat in her studio surrounded by her paintings and tried to understand what she had just committed herself to. She was going to spend the next several months working closely with a man who had humiliated her, a man whose obvious obsession with her was both flattering and deeply unsettling. But as she looked at her easel, already beginning to envision the installation that would grace the hospital's new wing, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of a creative challenge that mattered beyond her own artistic fulfillment. She was going to create something extraordinary. And whether she liked it or not, Liam Cross was going to help her do it. The real question was whether either of them would survive the process with their hearts intact. What Ellie didn't yet understand was that some collaborations transform everyone involved, and that working closely with someone whose regret runs as deep as Liam's would challenge every assumption she had made about forgiveness, redemption, and the possibility of second chances. The project would test them both in ways neither was prepared for. The first official meeting took place at the hospital construction site, where the new pediatric wing was still more framework and potential than actual building. Ellie arrived wearing work boots and carrying a hard hat, her hair braided back and her notebook stuffed with initial sketches and measurements. Liam was already there, deep in conversation with the project foreman about structural considerations for the art installation. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking more approachable than she had ever seen him. When he spotted her approach, His face lit up with an expression of such genuine pleasure that she felt her carefully constructed walls waver. "The atrium will be here," he said, leading her to the center of what would become a soaring, light-filled space. 3 stories tall, with natural light from above, and windows on the east and west walls. Ellie closed her eyes and tried to envision the finished space, feeling the way the light would move through it throughout the day. When she opened them, she found Liam watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter nervously. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "Movement," she said, pulling out her notebook and sketching rapidly. "Something that responds to the light, changes throughout the day. Maybe suspended elements that cast different shadows as the sun moves, creating new patterns for the children to discover." As she sketched, she became aware of Liam moving closer, studying her work over her shoulder. She could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive that made her think of winter mornings, and feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Like a kinetic sculpture," he suggested. "More organic than that, like a garden made of light and shadow, something that breathes with the space instead of just occupying it." For the next 2 hours, they walked through the construction site, discussing sightlines and installation points, weight restrictions and safety requirements. Despite her determination to maintain professional distance, Ellie found herself drawn into genuine collaboration with him. His questions were insightful, his suggestions practical without being limiting. Most surprisingly, he seemed to understand her artistic vision intuitively, building on her ideas instead of redirecting them. "You've thought about this before," she observed, as they examined potential anchor points for suspended elements. "I've thought about you," he said, then immediately looked stricken. "I mean your work. I've studied your work extensively. The way you use light, the way you create depth with layered elements, it's extraordinary." The compliment, clearly sincere, made her cheeks warm. She had spent years struggling for recognition, for someone to truly see and understand what she was trying to achieve. To hear that understanding from him, of all people, was deeply unsettling. "We should probably head back," she said, suddenly needing space to process the intensity of working so closely with him. "Of course, but Ellie, this is going to be incredible. What you're envisioning. It's exactly what this space needs, what those children need." As they walked back toward the parking area, she stole glances at his profile. There was something different about him here. In this unfinished space dedicated to healing, the arrogance she remembered from the yacht party was completely absent, replaced by a focused intensity that was entirely directed toward realizing her vision. "Why is this project so important to you?" she asked impulsively. He stopped walking, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his expression suddenly vulnerable. "I spent a lot of time in hospitals as a kid. Nothing dramatic. Chronic asthma, some surgeries to correct it. But I remember how gray everything was, how the walls seemed to press in on you. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles and counting the holes, trying to find patterns that would take me somewhere else." The admission was clearly difficult for him, and Ellie felt something inside her chest soften, despite her determination to maintain emotional distance. "I used to imagine what it would be like if there were beautiful things to look at," he continued. "Things that changed and moved and gave you something to discover each day." "I know it sounds silly. It doesn't sound silly at all," she interrupted. "It sounds like exactly why I became an artist." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the carefully maintained professional barrier between them wavered. In his face, she saw not the arrogant billionaire or the obsessive stalker, but a lonely child counting ceiling tiles and dreaming of beauty. Then he smiled, a real smile, not the practiced charm she had witnessed at the yacht party, and she felt her heart skip in a way that terrified her. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Same time next week," she agreed, already knowing that she was in far more danger than she had anticipated. Over the following weeks, their collaboration deepened into something that felt less like work and more like a shared creative fever dream. Liam proved to be surprisingly hands-on, helping her test materials and experiment with light angles, holding elements steady while she adjusted their positioning. He had good instincts and better questions, pushing her to consider practical concerns without ever compromising her artistic vision. More concerning was the way he seemed to anticipate her needs. Coffee appeared at precisely the moments she needed caffeine. Technical problems were solved before she had fully articulated them. When she mentioned struggling with a particular engineering challenge, detailed CAD drawings appeared on her desk the next morning, signed with his initials. "You don't have to take care of me," she told him one afternoon when she discovered he had arranged for lunch to be delivered to the construction site. "I know I don't have to," he said quietly. "I want to. Is that so wrong?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to address directly. Because wanting to take care of someone implied caring about them, and caring implied feelings that went far beyond professional collaboration or guilt-driven penance. "Liam," she began, then stopped, unsure how to articulate the growing confusion in her chest. "I know," he said, understanding her unfinished thought with the intuition that had been developing between them. "I know this is complicated. I know you don't trust me, and I know I haven't earned the right to want to take care of you, but I can't seem to help myself." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his admission, made her walls crack a little further. This wasn't the behavior of a man trying to buy forgiveness or assuage his guilt. This was the behavior of a man who was falling in love, whether he understood it or not, and terrifyingly, impossibly, she was beginning to fall too. The realization hit her that evening as she worked alone in her studio, sketching final details for the installation. Somewhere between his careful attention to her ideas and his intuitive understanding of her artistic vision, between his stories of a lonely childhood and his obvious devotion to making this project perfect, she had started to see him not as the cruel stranger from the yacht party, but as a complex, damaged man who was trying desperately to be better than he had been. She was in trouble. Deep, complicated, heart-racing trouble, and she had no idea what to do about it. But as she looked at her sketches, designs that had evolved and improved through their collaboration, that had become something more beautiful than anything she could have created alone, she realized that perhaps being in trouble wasn't always a bad thing. Perhaps sometimes the most dangerous journeys led to the most extraordinary destinations. The question was whether she had the courage to see where this particular journey might take them both. The crisis came in the third week of November, when a structural issue threatened to delay the installation by months. The original anchor points for Ellie's suspended elements were discovered to be inadequate for the weight load, and the engineering consultants were recommending a complete redesign that would strip away everything that made the installation magical. Ellie stood in the unfinished atrium, staring at the revised blueprints with mounting despair. Without the suspended elements, her vision would be reduced to flat wall art. Pretty, perhaps, but lacking the dynamic interplay of light and shadow that would transform the space into something truly healing. "There has to be another way," she said for the fourth time that morning, her voice tight with frustration. The lead engineer shook his head. "Ms. Marchant, I understand your artistic vision, but we can't compromise on safety. The weight of your installation, combined with the movement factors you've specified, exceeds what the current structure can safely support." "Then we reinforce the structure," Liam said from behind them, his voice carrying the kind of absolute authority that had built his empire. "Whatever it costs, however long it takes." "Mr. Cross," the engineer began, "the delay would be significant. We're talking about additional steel reinforcement, which means partial demolition of work already completed, redesigned load calculations. New permits?" "I don't care about the delay," Liam interrupted. "I don't care about the cost. This installation gets built exactly as Ellie envisioned it, or it doesn't get built at all." The engineer looked between them with the expression of a man caught between an immovable object and an unstoppable force. I'll see what we can do." After he left, Ellie turned to face Liam, her emotions churning between gratitude and something more dangerous. "You can't just throw money at every problem that arises." "Watch me," he said simply. "This project matters too much to compromise. Your vision matters too much. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars." "Probably more," he agreed. "I don't care." "Liam, be reasonable." "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. and he took a breath before continuing more gently. For 32 years, I've been reasonable. I've made calculated decisions based on cost-benefit analysis and risk assessment. And you know what that got me? A successful business and an empty life. A perfect track record and no one who cared if I lived or died. He moved closer, his eyes intense with something that made her heart race. Then I met you, and for the first time, something mattered more than the bottom line. Your art matters. Your vision matters. Those children matter. You matter, Ellie. More than any cost or delay or reasonable consideration. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable, and impossible to take back. Ellie felt her carefully maintained emotional barriers crumble completely under the weight of his honesty. "This isn't just about the project anymore, is it?" she whispered. "No," he said quietly. "It hasn't been about just the project for a long time." They stood facing each other in the unfinished space, surrounded by construction debris and architectural plans, and Ellie felt the last of her resistance drain away. This man, this complicated, obsessive, generous man, had restructured his entire life around the possibility of earning her forgiveness, and somewhere in the process, she had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with him. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," he said, stepping closer. "I've never felt like this about anyone. Never wanted anything the way I want your happiness, your respect, your heart. It terrifies me. What if we're making a mistake? What if we're too different, too complicated, what if we're not?" He interrupted gently. "What if this is exactly what's supposed to happen? What if all of it, the yacht party, the cruel words, the pursuit, this project, what if it was all leading to this moment, before she could overthink it? Before her fears could resurrect the walls she had spent months building, Ellie closed the distance between them. Not for embrace, she wasn't ready for that yet, but to place her hands on his chest, to feel the rapid beating of his heart that matched her own. "I don't know how to do this," she said softly. "Neither do I," he admitted, "but I want to learn, with you. If you'll let me." Around them, the construction site hummed with activity as workers prepared to implement the structural changes that would make her vision possible. The installation would be delayed, would cost more than originally budgeted, would require months of additional work. None of that mattered. What mattered was standing in this unfinished space with a man who had proven he would move mountains to protect her dreams, feeling her heart finally ready to trust again. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's see what we can build together." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise after the longest night, and Ellie knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges they would face them as partners in every sense of the word. The installation would be completed. The children would have their healing space filled with light and beauty and wonder, but more than that, two hearts that had found each other through art and forgiveness would begin the most important collaboration of their lives, the creation of a love that could weather any storm and emerge stronger on the other side. But first, they would have to navigate the delicate transition from professional partners to something more personal, and neither of them was quite prepared for how vulnerable that journey would make them feel. The installation was scheduled to be unveiled on Valentine's Day, a coincidence of timing that had seemed merely ironic when the date was first set, but now felt like destiny. 3 months of additional construction, countless engineering challenges, and a budget that had tripled from its original scope had culminated in this moment. Ellie stood in the center of the completed atrium at dawn, watching the first light of morning begin its dance through her creation. After months of planning and hoping and adjusting, the installation exceeded even her wildest dreams. The suspended elements, dozens of delicate sculptures in metal and glass, caught the early sunlight and transformed it into cascading rainbows that painted the walls in ever-shifting patterns. The sound components responded to the gentle movement of air through the space, creating a subtle symphony that seemed to breathe with the building itself. But something was wrong. Despite the technical perfection of what they had created, despite the obvious beauty that would soon comfort countless children, Ellie felt a hollow ache in her chest. Liam hadn't been to the site in over a week, citing business obligations that required his attention. Their conversations had become brief and professional, stripped of the intimacy that had been building between them. She told herself it didn't matter. The project was what mattered, giving these children something beautiful and healing to focus on during their darkest hours. Her personal feelings were secondary to that mission, but as she stood alone in the space they had created together, she couldn't shake the feeling that something precious was slipping away. It's magnificent. She turned to find Ryan Matthews standing at the entrance to the atrium, his expression filled with genuine awe as he took in the installation. "Ryan," she said, surprised, "what are you doing here so early?" "Liam sent me," he said, moving to stand beside her. He wanted to make sure everything was perfect before tonight's unveiling. "Where is he?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, revealing more than she intended about the state of her heart. Ryan studied her with the kind of insight that made him such a good friend to Liam and such a successful business partner. "He's scared," he said simply. "Scared of what?" "Of ruining this. Of pushing too hard too fast and losing you completely." Ryan gestured to the installation surrounding them. "Do you have any idea what this project has meant to him? Not just the money, though he's spent enough to fund a small country, but the chance to create something beautiful with you. To prove that he's more than the man who hurt you that night." Ellie felt her chest tighten with understanding and frustration in equal measure. "He's been pulling away from me for weeks. Because he's falling in love with you, and he knows he doesn't deserve to." Ryan's words were gentle but direct. "He's trying to give you space to decide what you want, without the pressure of his feelings influencing your choice." "That's ridiculous," Ellie said, pacing to the center of the atrium where the light was strongest. "We're partners in this. We created this together. How can he just step back now like none of it mattered?" Because it all mattered. Every conversation, every shared moment of inspiration, every time you trusted him with another piece of your vision. It all mattered more than you realize. Ryan moved closer, his expression serious. "Ellie, I've known Liam for 15 years. I've never seen him care about anything the way he cares about you, but he's convinced that pushing for more than you're ready to give will destroy the fragile trust you've built." Before Ellie could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the atrium. Hospital staff members were beginning to arrive for final preparations before the evening's unveiling event. The moment for private conversation was ending, but Ryan had one more thing to say. "Tonight, after the unveiling, after everyone has seen what you've created together, ask yourself if this is really how you want your story to end. As business partners who created something beautiful and then walked away from each other." The day passed in a blur of final preparations, technical checks, and interviews with local media about the installation. Ellie threw herself into the logistics, trying to ignore the growing ache in her chest and the way her eyes kept searching for a familiar figure who never appeared. As evening approached and guests began to arrive for the unveiling ceremony, the atrium filled with hospital administrators, foundation board members, local dignitaries, and most importantly, children from the pediatric ward who would be the primary beneficiaries of the installation. Ellie watched from the side as a little girl with a bright pink headscarf reached out tentatively to touch one of the lower-hanging elements, her face lighting up with wonder as it responded with a gentle chime. An older boy in a wheelchair positioned himself where the light patterns were most complex, his eyes tracking the ever-shifting colors with fascination. This was why she had taken the commission, why she had pushed through months of technical challenges and emotional complications. These children, these moments of joy and wonder in the midst of difficult circumstances, this was what mattered. The formal program began, with speeches from hospital administrators and foundation representatives. Ellie was called forward to speak about her vision for the installation, and she found herself talking not just about the technical aspects of the work, but about the power of art to heal, to comfort, to remind people that beauty exists even in the darkest places. As she spoke, her eyes swept the crowd, still hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who had made all of this possible, but Liam was nowhere to be seen. "And now," the hospital administrator said as Ellie concluded her remarks, "we'd like to invite Mr. Liam Cross of the Cross Foundation to say a few words about this incredible gift to our young patients." Ellie's heart stopped as she saw him emerge from the back of the crowd. He looked impeccable as always in a dark suit that emphasized his tall frame. But there was something different about his expression, a vulnerability that made her breath catch. He moved to the podium with the confident stride she remembered from their first meeting. But when he began to speak, his voice carried none of the arrogant authority she had once associated with him. "When I was 8 years old," he began, "I spent 6 weeks in a hospital much like this one. The walls were beige, the ceiling was white, and the only thing to look at was a small television mounted in the corner of my room that played the same cartoons on endless repeat." The crowd had fallen completely silent, drawn in by the personal nature of his opening. "I remember lying in that bed, counting ceiling tiles and making up stories about the water stains on the walls, trying to find something, anything beautiful, to focus on besides the fear and the pain and the terrible certainty that I was completely alone in the world." Ellie felt tears prick at her eyes as she realized what he was doing. This wasn't just a dedication speech. This was a confession, a public laying bare of the childhood experiences that had shaped him into the man he had become. "I promised myself then that if I ever had the power to change things, I would make sure no child had to stare at blank walls while fighting the hardest battle of their life." His eyes found hers across the crowded atrium, and the connection between them felt electric, charged with months of shared creation and growing love. "But I couldn't have done this alone. This installation exists because of the extraordinary vision and talent of Eleanor Marchant, an artist who sees beauty where others see emptiness, who creates light where others see only darkness." He paused, his gaze never leaving her face, and Ellie felt as if they were the only two people in the room. "Eleanor, you've given these children something I never had. Beauty to focus on, wonder to discover, hope to hold on to. But more than that, you've given me something I never thought I deserved. The chance to be part of creating something that matters, something that will outlast both of us and bring joy to countless children for generations to come." The crowd began to applaud, but Liam held up a hand, indicating he wasn't finished. "There's something else these children have taught me during the months I've spent visiting this hospital," he continued. "They've taught me that life is too short and too precious to waste on pride or fear or the worry that we don't deserve the good things that come our way." He stepped away from the podium, moving through the crowd toward her with purpose and determination written in every line of his body. "Eleanor Marchant," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the atrium despite the fact that he was no longer using the microphone. "You are the most extraordinary person I have ever known. Your talent, your compassion, your ability to forgive and create and inspire, you've changed me in ways I'm still discovering." Ellie's heart was racing so fast, she felt dizzy, her hands trembling as she realized what was happening. Around them, the crowd had gone silent again, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. "I know I have no right to ask for more than your professional collaboration," Liam continued, stopping directly in front of her. "I know that what I did that first night was unforgivable, and I know that I've probably complicated your life in ways you never asked for. But standing here, in this space we created together, surrounded by the joy it's already bringing to these children, I can't let this moment pass without telling you that I love you." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Ellie heard nothing except the sound of her own heartbeat and the gentle music of the installation surrounding them. "I love your fierce dedication to your art," he continued, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. "I love your compassion for others, your strength in the face of adversity, your ability to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. I love the way you've made me want to be better than I am, the way you've shown me that redemption is possible if you're willing to do the work." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, and the crowd collectively held its breath. "Eleanor Marchant," he said, getting down on one knee in the center of their masterpiece, surrounded by light and color and the gentle music they had created together. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the extraordinary woman you are?" The question echoed through the atrium, amplified by the acoustics they had so carefully designed, blessed by the light that painted everything in shades of hope and possibility. For a moment, Ellie couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think of anything except the man kneeling before her with his heart in his eyes, and their entire complicated, beautiful, impossible love story written in the space around them. Then, as the installation chimed softly in the background, and the children watched with wide-eyed wonder, she found her voice. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. Her voice ringing with certainty and joy. "Yes, yes. Absolutely yes." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers as Liam slipped the ring onto her finger. A piece of art in itself that captured the essence of light and movement in precious metals and stones. But Ellie barely noticed the celebration around them, focused entirely on the man rising to his feet before her, his face radiant with joy and relief and overwhelming love. "I love you too," she said softly, meant for his ears alone. "I've been trying not to, but I love you desperately, completely, against all logic and reason." "Thank God," he breathed, and then his arms were around her, holding her close in the center of their creation. Their love story finally complete, around them, the installation continued its eternal dance of light and sound, a testament to what was possible when two people chose to create something beautiful together. The children clapped and laughed. The adults wiped away happy tears, and somewhere in the crowd, Ryan Matthews smiled with the satisfaction of a man who had watched his best friend finally find his way home. This was how their story was meant to end, not with cruel words on a yacht, but with a promise of forever in a space filled with healing light, not with pride and misunderstanding, but with love and forgiveness and the kind of hope that transforms everything it touches. As the celebration continued around them, Ellie and Liam held each other close, knowing that their greatest collaboration was just beginning. The installation would bring joy to countless children in the years to come, but for them, it had already given the greatest gift of all, the chance to discover that love, like art, has the power to transform even the most broken things into something extraordinary and eternal. But this wasn't truly the end of their story. It was the beginning of something even more beautiful than anything they could create with light and sound and suspended dreams.